Assalamu alaikum wa rahmatullahi wa barakatuh, my dear brothers, sisters, friends and the foes out there, and welcome to another episode of the Blood Brothers podcast with your host, Dilly Hussain. Before I introduce today's guest, I want to remind all the avid podcast listeners that you can find this episode on all 4 seasons on all the major audio platforms. And if you're tuning in via YouTube, don't be cheeky. Do remember to click subscribe to the Five Pillars YouTube channel. Today I'm joined by a Palestinian doctor from Britain. He is someone who is a Gazan himself, someone who has visited Gaza and has been working in the medical field out there. Truly honoured to have him on within his busy schedule, and that's none other than Dr. Mohammed Mustafa. Assalamu alaikum.
Assalamu alaikum. Thank you for having me.
How are you, my dear brother? You okay?
I'm good. I mean, after that introduction, I'm a bit nervous now.
How's your day been? I know you've had a busy schedule.
Yeah, we've been touring around the world. Ever since I got back from Gaza, I've been trying to get the word out about Gaza. And it's not been easy because I've literally had to essentially put my life on hold for this. I've sold my car. I've moved my stuff into a storage unit. I've given up the lease of my apartment. I've stopped my medical training program. And all of that is obviously to one, talk about Gaza, get it out in the mainstream, change the narrative. And it's a children's hospital that we're trying to get into Gaza. And in order for us to get this children's hospital in Gaza, we need to change how aid is done in Gaza. Now, the way aid is done right now is funneling people into cages and shooting at them.
The GFH, yeah.
Yeah. And what we're trying to do is we're trying to get, instead of NGOs, doing the distribution of aid or running these hospitals, we want to get governments to run these hospitals and allies of Israel to run the hospital, because that's the only thing that will guarantee safety, and it's the only thing that will guarantee a supply line of medical equipment, doctors and aid.
Do you think it's beyond the remit of Israel to bomb a British hospital or an American hospital or a French hospital?
Look, nothing's beyond the remit, but what is the problem? The problem is when you stop trying, So if they bomb this hospital and it's a British hospital, Australian hospital, Canadian, whatever, however many nations we can get to do this hospital, if they bomb that hospital, that creates a problem. And that creates further diplomatic problems, and it creates further political pressure. So I think from just a self-preservation perspective, they wouldn't bomb it, not because they don't bomb hospitals, but because they don't want the aggravation and the fallout that will come from bombing this hospital. But, we've got to be pragmatic about how we help Gaza now. And, I'm a Palestinian. I want, obviously, Gaza to be run by Palestinians. But unfortunately, the landscape of the world right now means that we can't do that. It has to be other nations that help and other nations that do things for security, safety. And so we are not starved to death. And in order to do that, we need to get nations on board. And that's what we're trying to do.
Now, I know this podcast is not much about you.
Yeah.
And I know that's something you don't want to do per se. You want to make it about Gaza and what you've experienced, what you've seen and what you want to do.
Yeah.
But you are a Palestinian with a northern accent with an Australian flag on your Instagram.
Yeah.
So, and then you're the beast from the Middle East. This is a lot happening. Tell us a bit about
there is a lot
Tell us a bit about your heritage and where you're residing. Where was the country of birth? Like, tell us a bit.
So I was, my dad was born in Gaza. He's a Ghazawi. My mum is from Hebron, but she was born in Jordan. Okay. And I was born in Mecca. And I moved over to the UK when I was 4 years old, and I grew up in the north of England. I was educated here in the UK. I went to Liverpool Medical School, and I worked up in Glasgow for a couple of years.
Are you a Liverpool fan?
No, I'm an Arsenal fan.
Okay, carry on, bro.
Yeah. And then after that, I moved to Australia because the NHS was a nightmare. But it's not even, I didn't move just because of the NHS. I moved because I wanted to be an emergency physician. And emergency physician training in the UK is nothing compared to emergency physician training in Australia. You're a lot more hands-on in Australia. There's a lot more procedural skills that you do. And I wanted to be procedurally capable so that one day I would go and do work like what I did in Gaza, which is work in natural disasters, war zones and things like that. So, subhanAllah, that was my plan to go there, to move away from family, was to better educate myself. And, it came in useful, obviously, when I was there in Gaza.
What made you go to Gaza? And have you been to any war zones or conflict zones before that?
So, I hadn't been. I hadn't been before to any of the any war zones for conflicts, but Gaza was my first one. It was a bit of an unusual experience because I was born a refugee, and because of that, I was never allowed to go to Palestine to visit. I only was allowed to go when I had a British passport, when I became British. And the first time I'd ever entered Palestine or Israel or anything like that was during this mission, my first mission last year into Gaza. So I entered Gaza, not as a Palestinian, I entered as a British doctor. And it's kind of a bittersweet moment. It was sweet that I was here and I was home and I was amongst my people. But it was also a bitter moment that, like, I'm not here because this is my home. I'm here because I'm British. It's very conflicting, because at one moment you're happy, but you're also it's the
juxtaposed nature of it.
It's the juxtaposed nature of what I'm experiencing, what I'm in right now.
If I were to throw single words at you, tell me what comes to mind in light of your trips to Gaza. Family.
Everything.
Happiness.
Conflicted.
Masculinity.
Plenty of it.
Loneliness.
Very lonely.
Abandonment.
Heartbreaking.
Life.
Death.
Death.
Life.
Freedom.
One day.
Inshallah. What was the most... You would have seen a lot. What memories has stuck?
The second time that I was there, I was there during the ceasefire. The first few days I was there was during the ceasefire, right? And we would still get children that came in that had been shot in the head. Had been shot in the head by drones. And I remember we had this kid who was shot in the neck, and the bullet had exited through the child's chin. This child was only 2 years old. And the father had carried this child in a blanket from his home. And remember, there's no fuel in Gaza. And father couldn't afford to pay someone for a donkey cart to get it to the hospital. So he ran with the child in a blanket with a gunshot wound through the neck that had gone out through his chest. 2-year-old child. And I remember when that child arrived into the emergency department, he was still alive. And the father placed the child in my hands. And he says, "Yeah, doctor, he's still breathing." And, we don't even have a ventilator in the hospital, in the emergency department. We didn't even have a ventilator. And this child, you could see the fear in his eyes. The panic of his father was, but this child had lost so much blood that he was just in this kind of paralytic state. And because obviously the exit wound had been the chin, he was coughing up blood. And this child was choking on his own blood. And the child held onto my stethoscope as he was dying while he was choking on his own blood. And we didn't even have a suction device. And I didn't want to start putting my fingers down his throat to scoop up blood because I knew he was going to imminently die. And I just held this child while he just held onto my stethoscope, and I could see the fear in his eyes. I could see the despair in this child's eye. When you're holding a child choking on his own blood. And, when I said to the father, when the child died in my arms, I said to the father, he's dead. The father looked at me and says, "But I brought him to you alive. أنا جبت لك إياه عايش. I gave him to you alive." And, I just said, "I'm sorry. أنا آسف." That's all I could say. I'm sorry. It's hard. It's hard when you're like, because it's so many. When we have a mass casualty event, there's sometimes it could be hundreds of people in the emergency department. Dozens die, most of them children.
How many dead patients did you deal with?
I was there for some of the worst mass casualty events of the war.
Mm-hmm.
I was there last year when they, rescued the 4 Israeli hostages.
Yeah.
That day there was about 1,400 dead and injured.
Yep.
I was there that day. I was also there for the day that they broke the ceasefire, after this.
Yes.
That was one of the worst mass casualty events. We had 400 people killed in 2 hours. And usually the amount of dead times that by 3 is usually the amount injured. So yeah, you can imagine what that's like in the middle of the night when it's meant to be a ceasefire, and the hospitals aren't ready to deal with these mass casualties. There's not the staffing levels where we've got everyone on deck. There was only 3 doctors on that night in the emergency department, and obviously the international doctors that were asleep. And when we came down, there was about a team of 10 of us and hundreds of patients, and some of the most horrific injuries. I posted this on my Instagram, but we had a woman with her intestines hanging out. We had children with their heads missing. We had families bringing in children in plastic bags. They didn't even come inside the hospital. They just would take them to the burial place. Plastic bags.
You said you wanted to work in emergency and specialize in that area.
Yeah.
Did you envisage this type of violence and gore when you went there?
Look, I remember the first mass casualty event that I had was the first time I was there, and it was the first full day. So it was in the morning. It was about 9 o'clock in the morning. We had a missile strike, and it hit a children's playground. And when they start bringing in these bodies on the floor, I opened up the first blanket, and the first blanket was a child with half his head missing and brain matter everywhere. And I remember opening up the blanket, and it's the smell of burnt flesh, intestines hanging out, bone sticking out, limbs twisted facing the other way, burnt. And I remember just freezing for about 20 seconds at what I was seeing, because it's not just the sight, it's the smell that hits you. You can smell burnt human, cooked flesh. And I remember just freezing, and my hand was physically shaking. My hand was physically shaking, and I was, in that moment, I had this adrenaline rush, and I was panicked and scared. You have that fight or flight response, and I just froze. I froze for about 20 seconds, and I remember this nurse was just shaking my shoulders, and she was like, "Ya doctor, محتاجينك, we need you, doctor." And I just got myself, I was like, right, okay. And then I picked up the next child on the floor and put him on the bed, and we got working on him. And there was a student nurse, because a lot of these are students, a lot of the staff. The student nurse came in, and she just sat on the floor, and there was another child on the floor, and she crossed her legs. She placed this child's head on her legs, and she just started stroking his head as he died, because she knew we couldn't save him, and she could see he had a huge abdominal injury, and she was just there to comfort him. The thing that really, because I remember, I'm dealing with this child on the bed here. He's got a massive wound on his back. He's got a head injury, and we're trying to get a line in. We're trying to get some vitals on him. And I remember seeing that nurse from the corner of my eye, and I remember thinking to myself, I really, really thought about it that night, right? I really analysed it, and I was thinking to myself, the fact that this nurse, this woman, knew her role in that moment, which was, I'm going to comfort this child. How many children has she seen die where she's had to come up with a plan, a system in place to deal with this? The putting the child on her lap, the stroking her head, the whispering in his ear. How many times has she done this? How many times did she watch these children die before she came up with this? Before she took the initiative to do this? And it really struck me at just the level of death that must be there. That this student nurse, she just instinctively knew her job was to comfort this dying child. Mm. I mean, that really, it really was quite profound for me. That's what I mean about death. It's so prominent in Gaza. It's everywhere you turn is death, because death is not just in the missiles that hit or anything like that. It's the infectious diseases. It's the starvation.
Infection, starvation, all of it.
All of it. It's the chronic diseases. It's the patients that can't have dialysis. It's the cancer that's not being treated. Death is everywhere. So, subhanAllah, sometimes, you're in, it's this, almost like this Black Mirror episode of what you're seeing. It's like a different reality.
So most of us for 20 months have been seeing these videos pretty much every single day in 4K. The blood, the gore, the intestines, the organs, the death, the destruction. And not so often we think about those who are dying out of starvation, malnutrition, infections, diseases. How often, how much attention do they get in light of the fact that the very little medical centres, or actually, how many hospitals are left in Gaza?
Well, I think it's something like 36 out of the 38 hospitals have been bombed in Gaza. I wouldn't call them hospitals. When you don't have gauze, when you don't have gloves, when you don't have masks, when you don't have basic antibiotics, it's not a hospital. What it is it's a structure with first aid.
Subhanallah.
That's what it is.
Outside of emergency surgeries, amputations, trying to save people who are literally at the brink of death.
Yeah.
How often did you deal with people who were starving or had diseases or illnesses, or malnutrition?
The first time that I was there,
yeah,
a lot of people now are talking about starvation now in Gaza, but I was there last year in June, and we were seeing kids every day dying from starvation. We used to see daily multiple children that would come in that were starving to death, that were cachexically thin, stick and bones, and we would sometimes just cover them up in a blanket and just let them die in the corner.
Are you married?
No.
Okay. How did your family feel about you going out?
My mum cried when I told her. I said to my mum, Mama, I'm going to Gaza. I've just had the call. I'll be going in 5 days. And my mum cried, and she was really upset. And she said, let me call you back. And she came back and she called me and she said, and this was the first time I went. And she came back and she called me and she said, look, Hamada. She says, death is in the hands of Allah. It's not in the hands of Israel. So I'm going to leave you in the hands of Allah. And, she said I could go. She only asked me for one thing, though. She said, I just want you to make sure that your niyyah, your intention, is pure before you go. And, every day I pray that my intention remains pure. So it's a difficult conversation to have. It's a difficult conversation to have with your father, with your mother. Because when we went in last year in June, I was meant to go in May, but they invaded Rafah, right? And the Rafah border was closed. And I was, I think, the first set of doctors that actually went in through Jordan. So we were the first aid workers that actually had went in since the World Central Kitchen workers were killed in Gaza. That's why it was so much turmoil for my mother, because there was so much news about international aid workers now being killed in Gaza. And there I was, literally the week after, about to go into Gaza. So it was quite the moment that we were going into Gaza was quite high tension, especially around international aid workers. And obviously it's just got worse since then.
I mean no offense by this, but it's because you mentioned Nia.
Yeah.
What type of reasonings could potentially be inappropriate reasons?
Nationalism. Some people want to go there because they want to help Palestine, right? Yeah, helping Palestine is important, but the niyyah is for Allah. It's not for a nation. It's not for a group of people. And that's where the slippery slope comes in. Am I doing this for my country? For the people of Gaza? Even though that's a noble cause to do it for the people of Gaza, your niyyah has to be that you do it for Allah. And that's why the slippery slope, it's not, obviously there's the other things where people do it because they want to be praised. People do it because they want attention. And people do it because it's like a spiritual cleanse for them, like it's all personal gain for them. That's obviously the niyyah that people know about is the wrong intention. But the other wrong intention is doing it for nationalistic reasons, doing it for, anything other than Allah. And that's where people start to make a slippery slope, because they think they're doing it for a noble cause. But niyyah means that you're doing it solely for the pleasure of Allah. And, it's hard for me because I'm from Gaza. My family lives there still. So am I doing it for my family? Am I doing it for the people of Gaza? That's an internal battle that I have to struggle with every day to try and purify my intention that I'm not doing it for them, I'm doing it for Allah. So that's where the niyyah can become very, very slippery. And that's why it's always important to renew your intention all the time.
What about your peers that you were working alongside in Gaza? How were they managing their own mental health in terms of the scenes that they were seeing on an hourly basis that was not stopping and hasn't stopped for the last 20 months. How were they managing? How were they coping?
Everyone copes a bit differently when we're over there. My way of coping was I would always constantly be working. If the A&E was quiet, I would go to the wards and I would, do ward rounds on the wards. I would check on patients that I'd seen in the ED a few days ago. That's the way I would cope. I would try and just be as helpful as possible as I can, having connections with the outside world, trying to help children get evacuated out, trying to bring media attention, doing, interviews in Gaza with reporters and stuff. I was just doing anything that I could that could help. If it can't be medical, then non-medical stuff, whatever it was. But, there was a lot of times where we cried. There was a lot of times where, I would step out of the emergency department and I would have to stand outside and just take a deep breath, just calm myself. And I could still hear the screams in there, but I'd have to take like 5 minutes just to compose myself again to go back in there. So, and some people, when the bombs started dropping, some people, were calling and wanted to be evacuated. They didn't want to stay. So everyone handles it in a different way. And everyone has a different danger threshold of what they're willing to go through and the amount of risk that they're willing to take when they go to Gaza.
How many Brits were with you when you were out there?
When I was out there, how many Brits were there? I saw a couple of Brits. I saw a couple of British doctors there, but, there was a lot of American doctors that were there. But I was, quite lucky. I had a range of doctors. I had Jordanian doctors that were there, Moroccan, Algerian, Singaporean doctors. I had like those were my peer group.
We briefly spoke about this before we started filming. And how do you manage to detach yourself from what you're seeing, what you've experienced?
Yeah.
You're a Palestinian, you're Ghazawi, you're an Arab, you're a Muslim.
Yeah.
We're human beings. We have views, we have opinions. How do you detach what's happening, the geopolitics of it, the reality of it, the different players, the dynamics, and your work as a doctor?
You can't detach. You can't detach from what you see. And I'm always going to be a Palestinian, a Ghazawi, and I'm always going to be a doctor as well. The only thing that is detached is what voice I use and the way that I express what happens. That's what I have to detach. But the reality is always there. The reality is I'm treating children that look like me. At one stage, I had a child that had the same family name as me. It turned out it was a family member. So this child, her grandmother is my mother's auntie. My grandmother's sister, my mother's mother, her sister, my mother's auntie, was her grandchild. So it was my mother's cousin's daughter. And, and that's the thing where I think my story is probably a bit more unique than any other doctor that had been there. Because I was treating children that looked exactly like me. I was treating children that had the same surname as me. And all that was going on is I had to remain composed and I had to keep working. And, for me, they're not numbers. They're human beings. And it's difficult sometimes when you watch on the media, 110 dead, 111, 200 dead. This is a point that, I think is very, very important to touch on. When you get used to seeing 200 people dying a day, right? Because we're forced to normalize this, right, by the fact that it continues to go on. When you're forced to watch people be dehumanized every single day, and you're forced to watch these kids and you scroll through, it doesn't affect your day anymore. You hear 100 dead and you still go to dinner, you still have your day, and it doesn't register. Yeah, you're concerned about it, but khalas, you move on with your day, right? That dehumanizes you. You now have become dehumanized and detached because you are allowing now 200, 400 people die today and it not even affect what you do during the day. So this genocide that's going on in Gaza, it doesn't just dehumanize the Palestinian people, it dehumanizes us as well that's watching. That's why it's not just the people of Palestine that need humanizing after this, it's all of us. The whole world has suffered from this genocide.
Brothers and sisters and friends, I see that you're enjoying the content. How come you've not clicked subscribe to the 5 Pillars YouTube channel? And if you're watching via Rumble, how come you've not subscribed on our Rumble channel? If you like the content, you like the guests, you like what we're talking about, it's absolutely inexcusable and cheeky for you not to click subscribe. Thank you and Jazakallah khair. In terms of aid getting through, currently the Americans and the Israelis, they've got the GHF set up, which is basically, as far as we're aware and from the reports that are coming from the ground, people are told to go to a particular location and they just get shot and killed.
Yeah.
What's your knowledge as far as up until now at the time of filming in terms of how much aid is getting through?
You know, look, these centres where they come and collect the aid. So first of all, look, humanitarian aid, the principles of humanitarian aid is you get aid to where it needs to be. It's not that you have aid and people come to the aid, because there are people in wheelchairs, there are people that are disabled, there are, people are trying to survive, homeless. So going to a place to get aid already goes against the principle of humanitarian aid. You're meant to give aid to the people who need it and meet them there and then. So that's the first thing. The second thing is this aid distribution now, they do the aid distribution in red zones. Red zones are areas that are occupied by the IDF, which means that people, when they go to these aid zones, they have to walk through militarized areas, militarized zones. So they have to walk every day 5 kilometers, 6 kilometers, and they have to walk through a militarized zone with drones overhead, tanks, to go get food. And the food that they're getting is enough to last them for 2 days, maybe 3 days for that one person. So they have to bring sometimes their kids with them to go get food as well, because everyone needs to eat. The aid is only, enough for 2-3 people for a couple of days. So you have to bring your children. And when you're there bringing your children, knowing that someone with a machine gun can mow you all down, which is what's been happening.
It's been happening.
Think about, to me, I always think about the trauma that these fathers have to make, that I have to bring my child to his death to get food. And if I don't, the child dies. These are not what if, this could be like when you play a game and you ask the most horrendous what ifs and people are like, I wouldn't decide. No, these people have to make those decisions there. I either have to walk with my children between tanks and people that think of us as animals to go get a little bit of food. And when I get there might not even be food, because there's plenty of times where people go there and they get turned away. So 1, I might risk their lives and not get food. And 2, if we go there, we might get shot at. And 3, I have to do this all again tomorrow. Every single day. This is what it's like now in Gaza.
That's why I asked you. One of the things was masculinity, because as a father, as a husband, you're qawwam, right? We're the providers, the ones who feed and protect. And during a genocide, fathers still have to be fathers. Husbands still have to be husbands. And what you just described there is it's a decision, a worst case scenario, which we can't even really imagine if we were to put ourselves in a situation there, where you've got a starving child, and if you don't go to this aid distribution location, they're going to die, so you have to make that perilous journey. With a very, very likelihood that you'll get killed. Subhanallah. When we began the podcast, you spoke about selling your car and putting stuff in storage. Some of our viewers and listeners might be thinking, why did you do that? Like, what's happening? How can you've sold things up?
So look, I mean, traveling and doing the advocacy work, right? I felt like I was an important voice to talk about what goes on in Gaza and the healthcare system in Gaza. And, what happens is doctors leave Gaza, they do a couple of interviews, they might even do a podcast, and that's it. The cycle, it's the next set of doctors that go in and out, and it's just regurgitation. And nothing gets done. There's no momentum. It's always the same stories that come out, and, everyone's talking about how horrific it is, but nothing changes. And I wanted to make a change.
What is that change?
Well, I want to make a change. I want to get better healthcare into Gaza. I obviously want the bombs to stop, and the shooting to stop, and the genocide to stop. But I'm a doctor. I'm not a politician, And a lot of people, since we've been doing the advocacy stuff, a lot of people have attacked me, for not condemning things enough, for not calling for this, and I'm just like, guys, there are people calling for that there. Let me stay in my lane and let me do what I can do. I'm a doctor. Let me be a doctor. Let me help these people from a medical point of view, right? There are other people that can help in other areas, but let me do what I'm most effective at, and that's saving lives. Let me try and do that. So, when I came out, I was like, look, if I can convince politicians and I can convince people to unite in getting a hospital into Gaza, and that's what we've been trying to do. So this hospital it's a different concept, right? It's not going to be, MSF or Save the Children or the Red Cross putting a tent into Gaza and having an NGO-run health facility. This is going to be government-led, right?
Which governments?
My governments, the British government, the Australian government, most likely New Zealand and Canada coming on board as well, and having this hospital that the security of it is governed by our governments, not the Israelis, not NGOs, not the UN, because none of these have either been trustworthy and none of them have been secure or safe.
It's one of the thinking behind it that there's least likelihood that Israelis would bomb a British, French or Canadian.
It's their allies. It's their allies. I mean, you can bomb a Palestinian hospital, but you can't bomb a British hospital. And if you do, there's political fallout for that.
There is, but yeah.
I mean, look,
Israel's already killed British aid workers.
They've killed British aid workers. They've killed Australian aid workers. Look, I know what it is. I know this is a problem, but the biggest issue would be just giving up, because the whole idea of them killing international aid workers is we stop coming. Mm-hmm. That's the idea. So, people always say, well, what's the point? Because they're going to bomb it anyway. All right, cool. Should we just give up? Do you want me to go home? Khalas, do you want me to stop? Do you want me to go home and forget about it? Like, let me just do what I've got to do. Let me at least try. Support me, right? If I fail, I fail. It's me that fails, not you. But don't sit here and start telling me the hospital's going to be bombed, so what's the point, right? Because look, even if the hospital does get bombed, for that 3 months that it doesn't get bombed, we save a few lives. Let me at least save a few lives. Let me save at least one life. Didn't it say in our religion, if you save one life, it's as if you've saved the whole world?
Yeah, whole of humanity.
Right? So let me save the whole of humanity by saving one life.
Mm-hmm. Have you had these type of comments or feedback off camera?
Oh, mate,
like, you're building a hospital just for it to get bombed, or like, why are you going to the same Zionist regimes that back Israel? That you've had
all of that, bro. All of that. I've been personally attacked, and I just look at it. I go, I'm just trying to build a children's hospital. What's that? Why is everyone up in arms about me trying to build a children's hospital? Oh well, you should be calling for the bombs to be. Obviously, I want the bombs to stop. That's why we're building this hospital, because of all the bombs being dropped and all these kids dying. But I can't do that. Mm-hmm. What I can do, though, is I can get this hospital so we can save those kids.
Who's going to fund it?
So that's the thing. Look, we're not even asking governments to fund this hospital. We're going to get the funding for this hospital. We're already in late-stage negotiations with a prominent Australian foundation, the Minderoo Foundation.
Okay.
It's headed by Andrew Forrest, who is a Australian mining tycoon.
Okay.
He's, he's a very smart businessman. He's also a very generous man. And, his daughter as well, who resides in London, extremely generous and has devoted her life to humanitarian causes. And the same with his former wife, Nicola Forrest, as well. So, we've reached out to the Minderoo Foundation. They've been amazing at, talking with us. They've been listening to us. They've been really interested in this hospital proposal. And, hopefully we are in serious discussions now with them for them to fund the whole thing. So, if they fund the whole thing, then all I really need from the governments is just to get on board and give us the logistics and the safety to get it in. But I'll bring you the doctors. I'll bring you the hospital. I've bringing you the money. Just give me the access. Give me the protection. That's all I'm asking for.
By protection, you mean security, right?
The security, yeah. Give me the security. Give me the security. Give me the protection. Give me the access, and let me do my work. Let me and these doctors that I'm bringing in do the work. I'm not asking money from you.
Now, you did a podcast with a non-Muslim lady, Australian. What's her name? She's got quite a big following. Yeah,
Abby Chatfield.
And after you did that podcast, you told me that quite a lot of Australian politicians reached out to you.
Yep.
How are conversations? How far have you got with conversations in Australia and the UK? Here, I know you met Jeremy Corbyn at Dilly Hussain.
Yeah.
How far are you getting with this project?
Look, I mean, I've only just arrived in the UK to push it in the UK, but we've already made more progress than a lot of people. Hopefully in Parliament, the question about the hospital will be raised in Parliament next week.
Sure.
In Australia, I've met with the Foreign Minister. And I have, direct access to the Foreign Development Minister as well over there. So, we're in serious conversations there. I've went to Jordan this is where the hospital will be built. It'll be built in Jordan and then driven into Gaza. I've met with senators in Jordan. I've met with the Australian ambassador in Jordan. I've met with government officials. And I'm trying to connect the dots with all these different MPs, different senators, to come together to work as a coalition to get this in. I'm just one man.
How's the response been?
The appetite to help Gaza and the children of Gaza is huge. It's just the courage and the will of who's willing to take the first step, say, all right, let me lead this initiative. Like I say, I'm just a doctor. Mm-hmm. You know, I can help get the fundraising for the hospital. I can build the hospital. But at the end of the day, I can't get this hospital into Gaza. I'm not Superman. I can't break the siege. I can't walk it in. I can't protect it. And that's where I need governments to come in. But, you know, it's hard, man. It's hard doing this. I literally, like I said, I've had to give up my whole life to dedicate myself to this mission, you know, and I've not got a big organization behind me. I've not got money behind me. I've got my GoFundMe that funds me traveling and doing all of this. And I've just got, you know, my phone, a bit of social media, and, you know, maybe the gift of the gab. I don't know what it is, but, you know, we're getting things done. And, you know, it's only me and one other guy. The other guy is a nurse, an Australian nurse called Matu. And, you know, he's like the back of the house. He helps organize everything. He helps run things. And I'm the front of the house. And it's just two people.
How do you meet Matu?
You know, I met Matu through, you know, the NGO that we went with into Gaza. We both did the social media. So I was helping run the social media for free. Mm-hmm. And I was doing that in my own time. And Matu actually reached out to help run the social media. He's a nurse. So, you know, we both ran that social media for a little while together. And we seemed to form a friendship and a bond and a mutual understanding of what was needed for Gaza. And, you know, we've just taken this campaign ourselves. You know, we've been dealing with doing my social media, interviews, traveling around the world. You know, I was on the flotilla with Greta and Tiago and all of them. I was at the march in Cairo. I met with Nelson Mandela's grandson, Chief Mandela. You know, there's not a place that I've not been. There's not a halls of power I've not walked in to get this done. And I've got the proposal ready. I've got the infrastructure ready to build this hospital. I mean, if I can do this after being out of Gaza for like less than 2 months.
It's big, man.
It's a lot that I've done in a very little amount of time. It's a lot that two of us have done in a very short amount of time. And I think it's because the niyyah, we always renew the niyyah, we always renew the intention, we want to get this done. But I believe we can do it. And I know, look, man, honestly, but some of the worst people for this are other doctors and nurses. Like, they're just going to bomb it. Why bother? You'd be better off doing this or better. And I'm just like, guys.
Hearing this from doctors.
Mate, hearing this from doctors, nurses, all kinds of people. And I remember just thinking to myself, look, man, if you think that that's what needs to happen, then I'm going along the wrong way, right? And you've got a better idea. Go out there and campaign and do it. But if you're not willing to sell your property, you know what I mean? If you're not willing to give up your career, if you're not willing to not sleep and live out of a suitcase and give up your home, if you're not willing to do all of those things to get your point across, to get whatever project you think we should be doing, then don't come and start complaining to me and telling me what I should do. You know what I mean? Let me do what I've got to do, and then you do what you've got to do. If you want to support me, great, but enough with this negativity. And, you know, it's this pro-Palestine movement. One thing it's really good at is eating itself. They eat their own.
I think that's because there's a lot of people that gatekeep the cause.
They do.
You're telling me about the medical front. I'm telling you from an activist front, from a dawah front. Nearly in every front, there's gatekeepers.
Yes.
Now, gatekeepers are all good and well.
Yeah.
Because these are people who obviously feel very seriously about the cause.
Yeah.
But what that tends to happen is that you start defining what isn't acceptable.
Yes.
Or setting certain standards of success, which, quite frankly, no one needs to really subscribe to.
Yeah.
And really, the liberation of Palestine should be a mass cause. Obviously, Muslims see it in a particular perspective, but there's an appeal to non-Muslims and people of justice.
But see, this is the problem, right? Because right now in the pro-Palestine movement, people who were pro-Israeli are coming over to the pro-Palestine movement, right? Mm-hmm. But these people, you've got to remember, they are changing their entire life perspective. Some of them are even changing their whole identity of who they are. Their identity might have been that I was born and raised a Zionist and I believed that there was no apartheid, there was no occupation, there was no ethnic cleansing. To suddenly one day realize what history is and what's actually happened, right? You've got to remember, for that person, it's not just a case of changing your mind and opinion. It's the family that I was raised, the thoughts and the beliefs that I had, the experiences that I had, the foundation of it was based on light. Now, I could be 30 years old, 40 years old, and now this entire foundation that I built my life on has been pulled underneath. I can't expect that person to have the same level of understanding
For sure,
of the Palestine cause like I do. So these gatekeepers, when they come and they want to say, oh no, they believe in Israel has a right to exist, right? Yeah. And they believe in, guys, stop with the gatekeeping. We're allowed to have a range of views in this movement, right? Yeah. And the thing that I find the worst thing about it is I'm a Ghazawi, right? I've lost dozens of family members in this war, right? I've been ethnically cleansed out of my own country. I've had to watch my family members die. Right? You haven't. I've stood there in the hospitals as they've been bombed. You haven't. Right? But you're sitting here telling me what I can and can't do and my advocacy and how I'm doing things and what I should say and what I should not say. To me, I just look at that and I'm just go, guys, like, who are you? Do you know what I mean? Especially when I get sometimes non-Palestinians, non-Muslims coming up to me and telling me how I should do my advocacy.
Madness.
Do you know what I mean? And it's just like, but this is what I mean about the movement. The movement needs redirection. It needs leaders. It needs a maestro. I'm not saying I'm a maestro. I'm not. I'm just a doctor.
What about multiple maestros in different fronts?
It needs multiple maestros in different fronts. And, what needs to be at the center of it? It needs to be Palestinian voices. Because ultimately, Palestinians are the ones that are willing to give up the most for this. Really, I mean, you see how much of their families are being wiped out. They're the ones that are willing to stand there and resist.
The very fact that they're still there 80 years on.
Exactly.
Is the very fact because they've resisted.
Because they've resisted, yeah.
And they've refused to.
And they've refused. And the resistance comes in many forms.
Yeah.
You know what I mean? It comes in their artwork, in their poetry, in their education. And to me, I just, sometimes I feel like just telling people, I say, like, guys, like, you don't even understand the pressure that is on my shoulders. I have to sit there. Because right now there's a communication blackout in Gaza, right? Yeah. I don't know when the communication blackout finishes. I don't know if my family's going to be alive or dead, right? But I still have to go on the road and do these media things. I still have to have meetings with MPs. I still have to talk in a calm manner, in an approachable manner. I still have to be reasonable. I still have to walk the line. I have to do all of that knowing my entire family could be massacred right now in Gaza, right? And yet they still want to tell me about your advocacy, the way that you're doing it. So, this is all, it's really problematic. And I feel like, that these gatekeepers in the movement are beginning to be a problem. And I've only just, got out in the forefront of trying to lead something here in the movement. And, we've already had a lot of backlash already.
Let's conclude more on positive notes. Viewers and listeners, if they want to help you with what you're doing, how do they contribute towards a hospital if there is a way?
Yeah.
Or how do they support you in the work that you're doing?
Look, man, I would say, like, obviously, follow us on Instagram. I think if you follow us on Instagram, that can help drive our voices.
So besides the beast from the Middle East, who else should they be following?
Look, I think following, like, Dilly Hussain is a good one. But, like, look, there's a couple of things. Write to your MPs.
Sure.
Right? Push them to back this British hospital in Gaza. Have a British, because, look, it's an objective goal that we can reach. Right now, if the British government say we're going to increase aid to Gaza, what does that look like? They've given another 10 million to UNICEF or whatever, but we're not seeing the tangible difference it's making, right? But if we have a British hospital in Gaza where children are coming in with a severed leg, crying, burnt, and then they're walking out with a prosthetic, with a smile on their face, holding their mother's hand, people are looking at that and we're seeing objective changes, right? We're seeing something change. It brings down the temperature in this country, right? It stops the hostilities between different communities because it now feels like British government is doing something to help, right? So what I need people to put pressure on the government to do this. I need people to write into their MPs. I need people to talk about their MPs. And I need people to back the idea because I need public support for this. I need public support for a British, Australian, Canadian hospital in Gaza that's going to be supplied by the Western doctors. Obviously there'll be Muslim Western doctors as well, but doctors coming in there that are providing not just world-class healthcare, but world-class resources.
Have you priced this up?
Yes, we've got the plan. Everything's ready. Everything's ready to go. If they give us the green light, we can start building tomorrow.
Costing wise, how much is this hospital going to cost?
I mean, look, the cost wise for a 100-bed pediatric hospital with a ICU, with doctors' quarters, with a pharmacy, with a solar-powered generator, with a machine that fills 8 oxygen cylinders an hour, pathology lab, blood transfusion lab, immunization clinics, a cafeteria, and a kitchen. 10 million US.
10 million US.
And that would help running costs as well for the first few months as well. That's fully kitted out. So it's not expensive. And what we would have is 100 bed. I want a 200 bed. I want a 300 bed pediatric hospital. But I'm starting at this budget because I reckon we can get this budget like that. And once we get that and we start the building process, then once we're building it, then we can increase. And it'll be built in Jordan. And then we can increase. We can say we want 200, we want 300 beds, whatever it is. But, you know, we've got to get past the first stage. The first stage is getting the green light. So I need everyone to back me, support me, write into their MPs, pressure the government. Let's get this backed. I don't want money from the government. I know there's a lot of people going, why are we giving money to those brown Palestinian? You know, I know there's racism. I'm being pragmatic about it, right? Yeah. I know people don't want to put their taxpayer money to help black and brown people. I get that, right? I'm just being pragmatic. I've lived in this country my whole life. I understand racism. I've experienced it, right? I'm not asking for money. I'm asking for logistics, right? We'll be the doctors there. We'll put our lives on the line there. We'll go and help. There's plenty of doctors that want to do it that are not Palestinian, not Muslim, because this is a humanity movement. There's plenty of humanitarians in the UK, fellow British citizens that want to go there and risk their life and help those people. Let us help those people. Let us go help those people. I don't want your money. I don't want you to build it. I'll do it all myself, but just give me the access and let me get in there. And I need everybody to fight for it with me. I can't do this on my own. I'm one man. That's it. And it's hard being out there, you know, and exposing yourself out there and getting the message and people knowing who you are and, you know, being the front of house and, you know, death threats, threats on my job. Like, all of these things are all coming my way, right? Yeah. And look, I'm willing to take the hits, but, you know, there's only so much one person can take. I need people to help me out here. I need the help. You know what I mean? I haven't slept in 2 months. I barely sleep trying to get this done. But, you know, we've come so far, and I've not come this far to fail, so let's just keep pushing.
Inshallah. In terms of, have you made any inroads with any Labour politicians who can get this word to Keir Starmer? I
mean, look, I've spoken to a few, and I think we've had some positive conversations. Okay. And, you know, like I said, I've only been here for 2.5 days, and we've already had positive conversations, and I think we're gonna get somewhere.
Okay.
All right, I think we're going to get somewhere, but I need people to keep writing in to their MPs, write into the MPs, help.
So you want people to write to their MPs, raise awareness, speak about the need of a Western-led children's hospital that's going to be built in Jordan.
Yep.
Where's it going to be located?
It'll be built in Jordan, and then it'll be driven into Gaza.
For our viewers and listeners, for my own ignorance, how does a hospital of that size be driven into?
Because it's going to be made out of medical caravans. Okay. So we're going to be making like refurbished medical caravans. And in these medical caravans, you'll have, you know, this caravan is an operating theatre. This caravan is a 4-bed ward. And then, you know, we build all of these caravans and they just, when we get into Gaza, they're attached like a jigsaw puzzle. And essentially it's a hospital on wheels that we assemble in Gaza. But we build it in Jordan and we assemble it in Gaza. And like I say, it's got world-class facilities. It's solar panel powered. In Gaza, they'll build the water and the sewerage work. They'll have cement walls, so it's a gated hospital that has running water, running sewerage, and it has all these world-class facilities. It's not a tent. It's a semi-permanent structure. When Gaza gets rebuilt and they rebuild the big hospitals, that medical caravans can be reused and applied into the bigger hospitals and used as extra space for patients, or we could keep it as it is and have that as an international hospital where international doctors for the next 10, 20 years come and work and do complex operations and complex theatres in that hospital. It could be a base, you know, for international doctors, because after, you know, when this genocide is over and all the stories and the horrors come out, there's going to be an international response to rebuild Gaza. And then there's going to be an international response to help the people in Gaza. And having this hospital already there and ready and having it as a base for Western nations and Western doctors to come is, you know, it's self-evident or how beneficial that could be.
lastly, when are you planning to go back?
Tomorrow. If I can go back tomorrow, I'd go back tomorrow. But I know me speaking out and me talking and the online presence that I have, that'll make it very difficult for me to get back into Gaza. But inshallah, when I do go back into Gaza, I go back into Gaza with my hospital.
Inshallah ta'ala. Dear Dr. Muhammad, it was an honor having you on, bro.
Thank you. Thank you so much for having me.
May Allah accept your efforts.
Allah
May Allah make it easy for you. And make you successful in your endeavors, Abi.
Thank you. Allah khali. Thank you, brother.
Brothers, sisters, friends and foes, I hope you enjoyed this episode as much as I did. Do remember that you can find this episode on all 4 seasons on all the major audio platforms. And if you're tuning in via YouTube, don't be cheeky. Do remember to click subscribe to the 5 Pillars YouTube channel. Until next time, Assalamu alaikum wa rahmatullahi wa barakatuh.